Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a completely custom campaign in real time so that you can all see all the steps, all the thoughts, all the moments of hesitation, all the considerations, warts and all that go into writing a fully fledged campaign and adventures. I'm RJ Kerr. I'm your host, as always. And today we are going to be picking up with one of the next sort of mini encounters that we have been working on. We just started working on our last session on Wednesday, if you're watching this in real time, where we have our characters investigating a siren looking for some clues as to the location of this artifact they're hunting. But if you're joining us for the first time, or you're watching, you're watching the recording of this for the very first time, let me go ahead and get you caught up with what we've got going on. So we are, as I said, working on a completely custom campaign, including a totally original Domain of Dread, and we have done a lot of work on this already. We have figured out how our characters enter this domain of dread through a portal that opens up on the blood moon. We've talked about kind of motivations, we kind of pull them into this world, that sort of things, the kind of hooks that we need. We figured out where they land in a shanty town that we're calling Darkport that sits on the edge of an inland sea. And we figured out that this inland sea is a big component of this domain of dread, that it used to be the basin of a thriving metropolis that has now fallen into ruin and become flooded. We have figured out that this domain of dread contains an elemental evil called Lavander, who is sort of the dread lord of this domain. We have figured out our very first adventure where our characters are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, discover the existence of a long lost artifact. An artifact that gives the wielder power over this domain of dread, and in doing so, realize that this artifact is their best way out, their best opportunity to escape with their lives. And so they need to go find it. And so while we are working on a part of the adventure that is very open ended, gives the characters, gives the players a lot of agency, gives the characters lots of places to explore. And so we're using a node style structure for that. And so effectively, what we have is we have lots of clues that we're sprinkling out throughout the world here, and each of those clues leads the characters to a node, leads them to an investigative scene, leads them to some kind of encounter or situation where they can learn more, find more clues, and move on to the next, eventually following this bread trail to the location of the artifact. Now, there's lots of extra clues in the world because we want our characters to be able to go anywhere they want and kind of explore and piece it together as they see fit. We want our players to have that agency, but we also want to give ourselves a little bit of structure to work with so that we're not having to kind of create all this on the fly as we play it. So we have brainstormed a bunch of these locations. We've brainstormed a bunch of these clues. We've written two of the adventures. One, a 5-room dungeon style adventure. One is a heist style adventure using the 5-scene dungeon method that I like so much. And now we are working on one that's more of a layered or a complex social encounter. And that is our sea shanty siren encounter. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll talk about kind of what we're doing here. We're still very early days in this process, and so lots to build out in this section. But it's not, say, a full-fledged dungeon, so we've got a little bit of a different way of kind of going about this. Before we continue on, I do want to remind you this is an interactive stream. So as you have thoughts, ideas, opinions, concerns, questions, or anything else you want to talk about while we're doing this, please feel free to jump in the chat and speak your mind. I love hearing from you guys. You come up with some great ideas. You have some great questions, and we do some great talking points out of that. So feel free to hop in the chat as needed. Now, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, last time we were really kind of brainstorming this out, where we were kind of doing very loose form ideas for what this could be. We noted down some potential clues, some things that we want to kind of be worked into this particular node, clues that lead to the moving isle encounter or adventure later on in this section of the adventure. Clues that lead to the treasure hunter, which is the 5-room dungeon adventure we've created. Another one that links to this historian Old Salt, which is another social encounter kind of thing that we have going on, but a much simpler one. That's one of the first things the characters can investigate. And now we're working on kind of what is it that we want out of this particular portion of the adventure and this encounter, or this particular portion of the campaign in this encounter. And so, we had come up with a couple ideas that the siren is we're thinking a predatory creature by nature, that she lures beings to her atoll and feasts on them, but that recently she's got a problem, and she's willing to trade uh, information to the characters for the solution to that problem. And we're still debating on what that is. Maybe she's weak from running from the ghosts of her victims, and she wants the PCs to destroy a ghost ship. Maybe she's looking for someone to pass her cure down to, so that she can return to a normal life, and that there are some specific requirements for this kind of person that she needs to pass the curse down to. Um, but whatever the case, she's ancient, she predates Evander, and she has so much information that the characters can access. And so this led us to a fundamental question. Are we making a 5 scene dungeon sort of thing for this and interpreting that very loosely and turning a this social encounter into that kind of structure, which is perfectly valid? Or are we going a different route and doing something that's a little more organic, perhaps a little less structured, but still creates this complex social encounter? Or are we going to try to do something in between? I will say that there's no right way to do this. When you're doing this for yourself, if you like the structure that comes with something like a 5 scene dungeon, because it kind of tells you what to include, and gives you kind of a pattern for play, you can do something with that structure for this, and it will feel very original, in a lot of contexts. Your players are unlikely to notice the structure behind it once you're done with it. Nothing wrong with that. Or you could be a little more open ended with it and do this more of a, as I said, a complex social encounter, which sometimes could be a little more difficult to run, um, but can still be a lot of fun, and it's something that we can build out here. First comment here, we've got Jonathan Frost. Should we go fully thematic here with song or music being pervasive, or is that too hokey and on the nose? Um, I don't know that that's too hokey or too on the nose. I think that's something we could potentially play around with as we do this, to kind of build some atmosphere as we go. I think the question would be, perhaps, um, it's not always song or music that we're hearing, but we can lean heavily into the sounds, the melody of them. We can describe the sea and the songbirds, and singing in the distance and that kind of deal, and do it that way, maybe. But I like the idea of there being a strong musical element to this, because this is a musical sort of creature, and we kind of want to. I think it could be fun to kind of lean into that. Um, uh, Ben Elder says, "Oh, like maybe she's lost the ability to sing, injury or curse. That's maybe that's her problem. We go with the classic, Ariel syndrome, where she's lost her voice and now she needs it back. Um, let's put that down as an idea. Siren's lost her voice and needs it returned. Um, yeah, that's a possibility too. Um, all good ideas. It really depends on what we want to lean into in this. Where the whole week from running from the ghosts and wants to destroy a ghost ship, is suggestive of there being a fair amount of combat in this. Um, the uh, uh, the siren looking for someone to pass her curse down to is more of a moral quandary that we put the characters in. And the siren having lost her voice and needing returned is more of a do-gooder's quest in a lot of ways. Um, uh, Although moral quandary to some degree there, because they are returning the voice to a predatory creature that eats people, and uses that voice to lure them in. Um, but yeah, we could go in that direction. It just depends on what we want to kind of include in this. Jonathan Frost says, way to subvert expectations, Ben Elder. Love the line of thinking. Yeah, lots of good ideas coming out of here. And kind of doing the Lost Voice as a classic, and could be really compelling depending on the sorts of interactions we want the characters to have and the kinds of hoops we want them to jump through for this. Um, so, question then is, do you guys want to do a 5 scene dungeon? Or do you want to do a more a different style, sort of complex social encounter? I'm kind of leaning towards doing this different style, complex social encounter because we've done a bunch of 5 scene and 5 room dungeon kind of stuff so far. Not that we won't do more of them in the future, but we've done a little bit of that recently. So why don't we do something a little bit new? Um, and let's say, um, oh, we got a comment here. Ben Elder says, I think maybe the social or moral options to balance it out, as the heist could possibly end up being combat heavy. Yeah, I tend to agree. And, I think there's also a tendency in D&D to, when in doubt, you know, lean on combat. Not that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but D&D doesn't have to be a combat game. It's got a lot of combat rules in it, and so a lot of people assume, or I think believe, that it's a combat game. But frankly, I think a lot of those rules are in place because combat's one of those areas of the game where role play can kind of break down without a strong set of rules. Whereas many other things can be resolved more organically with fewer rules, and more role play consideration. So why don't we lean into that? Let's steer away from doing heavy combat for this, and try to um, let's try to come up with some other options here, leaning into maybe some moral or social quandaries that we've kind of brainstormed here. So let's say, do we want to go with passing the curse down or Siren has lost her voice? Um, hmm. On the one hand, passing the curse down is likely to be something that the characters find very distasteful, to the point where they might even not be willing to do it, which might not be a bad thing. Because since there are many ways to find the clues they need to get going throughout this investigation, they can decide to just not engage with this and go look for the other clues and whatever the other solutions they need. And then if they don't find it, they have to come back in desperation and re-engage with this. So it can be an interesting thing to put something that's so uncomfortable in here as something that maybe the characters have to do as a last resort. So that's one option. Um, the siren having lost her voice is probably, it's a little bit of moral quandary, but it's a lighter moral quandary, and so I think it's something that the characters aren't necessarily going to flinch from in a lot of cases here, although they may feel a little conflicted as they go. Um, and so it's something to consider there if we want a heavy moral quandary or a lighter moral quandary, and in terms of whether we want this to be an option of last resort or something that they, are more likely to move through. Um, Jonathan Frost says maybe the two are related. Passing the curse is the easy way out, a replacement, or get our voice back, a fetch quest that involves more risk. Um, there's nothing inherently wrong with that idea, I will say. There is, those are having sort of options is a cool way to give players agency and give them some ideas on what they want to do. I will say that we already have a lot to build out for a lot of these adventures. We got a lot of different pieces and parts that fit together here. And so building 2 streams for this, that's eventually effectively 2 different kinds of adventures for this one section, adds a fair amount of work for us. And again, nothing wrong with doing that if you want to if you want to put that kind of work into it. But since there is a lot of other agency in other parts of this, I would kind of lean towards picking one or the other, so that we're not having to duplicate our efforts here. Um, so let's. I kind of want to go with the whole pass or curse down one. Um, Okay, well, hold on. We got some more. We got some more consideration in the chat here. So let's see here. Ben Elder says maybe the voice, maybe the party has to take the voice of someone else, perhaps an NPC that fits a certain requirement, e.g., good singer or passionate speaker. That's one way to meld the two of these without it becoming two different adventure arcs. Um, so yes, maybe that's part of the curse. I kind of like that. That merges the two here. I think. Um, and I think that's fair. I think that's a good way to approach this. So, um, so let's say the siren's got to look for someone to pass her curse down to. So, in fact, instead of passing her curse down to, she needs to steal someone's voice. So let's make this new. Siren needs to steal someone's voice and wants the characters to do it for her. The voice must have actually we'll say she has special requirements for the voice. For the voice quality, we're going to say. Okay, and I think that's the one we're going to go with. So let's go ahead and just highlight that so that we're paying attention to it. And we're making this more of a complex social encounter kind of deal here, as opposed to a 5-scene dungeon kind of style. So let's work a little more loosely on this. Let's see here. A couple more comments. Jonathan Frost says, okay, simplicity. That's a good compromise. And then Mr. Mex says, no smokers, lol. Yeah. And then Ben Elder says the moral quandary is that you're basically giving a shark its teeth back, as without it, she's not so dangerous. Exactly, right? And so you're putting her weapon back in her hands in a lot of ways here. And so again, I really like the moral quandary of that because it can become something that the characters find really off-putting, and they may have to do it as a last resort. It's one of the reasons I love things like hags and devils, what have you, because they know they shouldn't make a deal, but you can have them in situations where they don't really have too many other options, and you've got to pick the best of a couple bad choices, which I think makes for some really interesting role play moments and story moments. The kind of stuff that players talk about for years. So let's see here. We're going to sort of hash out a few details here on things that we probably are going to need in this to kind of flesh out this encounter. So I'm going to start with arrival, which again is not too dissimilar from entry for this kind of thing, where the characters need to show up and we need to set the mood for them. We need to have something basic, but we don't have to have anything too terribly complicated for that. And then we want, let's see, role playing siren. And so we get some information here about how to role play the siren and the dynamics of that particular interaction. And then we have this quest to go get this voice. And so let's make it easier on ourselves. Let's do a quest subheading here under role playing the siren, so that we can kind of outline it for ourselves, make it nice and simple. Looks like we have another comment in the chat. Ben Older says maybe down the line an NPC the party likes is lost to the siren's new song. Yeah, it's always a lot of fun to show the characters the consequences of their actions, be those good or bad or what have you, because it reminds them that they're not just making decisions for the moment, that there are downstream consequences for this, and it makes the world feel a lot more real. So it's certainly a good idea to kind of work into this sort of thing. All right, so then we've got rival role playing the siren. Let's see here. We probably want something that is along the lines of finding the voice, TBD. And then we want, let's see here, stealing the voice, TBD. And, ooh, we need a complication of some kind. Say complication or a twist. And the return. So what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. That for this kind of looser encounter here. And so we're not using a rigid structure. We're just kind of thinking about this in a logical format of what is going to happen as each of these necessary steps. But again, this could frame under like a 5 scene dungeon kind of deal because we could have our entry, we have our our setback, we have our core sort of puzzle here of finding the voice, and then our final confrontation of stealing the voice mixed in with this complication or twist, and then the return as our reward. So I mean, we really could frame it that kind of way if we wanted to, but let's try this different style here and see just kind of what we like about it or what we don't like about it. So those in my mind are kind of the steps that we would need to hit here. And we can work on these in any order that we like. I think that the best place to start is probably going to be role playing the siren. And we want to have a clear understanding of what she's like and to make it really simple to kind of or to make it a lot easier to role play her because she's going to be a big portion of this. Interacting with her is going to be very important. And so I think, probably want to start there, understanding our villainess in this case. Let's see. Jonathan Frost in the chat says, I had another complicated thought. LOL, remember how we had the idea that the telescope might need to be repaired in the tower? First encounter, maybe the siren can work to weaken Evander because she can quell weather with her voice. Interesting. Let me chew on that for a second. Then Mr. Mech says, is it someone's actual voice that they will lose, or is it something they can be stored somehow and the siren just mimics how it sounds? And Ben Alonso says, nice. Jonathan Frost says, another instance of returning to a former quest to solve the puzzle. Yeah. We could do something along those lines. But that adds a bigger question. And one that we probably want to solve sooner rather than later. And that is, what kind of a role does Ovander play in this world? Because we have talked about his existence. We have talked about some of what he can do and how he kind of appears, but we haven't really woven him into the story yet. He is more of a tangential entity that could cause problems more than interact directly in the narrative, and that makes him a weaker character. So we should probably get him interacting in some fashion. So maybe what if Ovander is the reason the siren is missing her voice at the moment? And what if Ovander becomes the villain of this adventure, becomes the entity to be foiled, as opposed to the siren being the both patron and villain. So maybe this is an encounter where the characters interact with the the powers of Evander and get their first real glimpse into his abilities and what makes him such a challenging foe. Because I can see him coming into play more often in the second half of this campaign, when the characters are a little more powerful, and they're a little more, um, they've got a little more resources in there. But hinting at him, showing him um, early on is a good idea. Um, Got a couple other comments here. Jonathan Frost says, so far most of the NPCs want to either placate or avoid him, pointing to Evander there. Yeah. And so he's a little distant from this, and we want him to be a little more active, I think. Then Jonathan Frost goes on to say, interesting distinction at Mr. Max, referring to, is it a voice that'll be lost or is it stored and somehow mimicked? Um, Coming back to that comment, Mr. Max, because we get diverted there for a second. In my mind, it is a voice that someone is going to lose, because that's the moral quandary here in a lot of ways, right? You're going to take something from someone else, and you're going to give it to this other creature, and it's not going to make the world a better place for doing that. It's going to get you what you need, but it's again giving teeth back to a shark. Now, this might be a beneficial shark. It might be a shark that's probably not going to bite you in the future, but it's certainly something to. It's certainly something that should give the characters pause, I think. Um, and if you just give them the option of, hey, we're going to borrow somebody's voice and now you can mimic it, um, I think that dilutes some of the moral difficulty surrounding this. Um, let's see here. But Ben Elder says, for role playing, I'd say lean into the predator aspects. Eyes take in the party as the weighing how much flesh they would yield. Voice husky with teeth sharper than any human. Beautiful, but somehow wrong. Where the water touches her skin, you see flash of scales. And Jonathan Frost says, predatory features is a nice touch. Yeah. I agree. I agree that it is. And those are good atmospheric elements. But when I say role playing, I mean more to her core motivations. What is it? We kind of know what she wants, but we need to understand what her values are, and like what it is that she's willing to give up and what she's willing to do and how far she's willing to go and things like that. And so we want to give some levers in here for as a DM, so that we can kind of role play her as a more complete person, not just as a pure predator, but somebody who has fears and concerns of her own. Um, and so something that we just want to kind of hash out and understand as we're building her out, to make her so much easier to role play when we do this. Um, and then Ben Elder says, the Siren's home could be the beached ship. Yeah, it could absolutely be a beach ship. So why don't we do this? Why don't we say, we'll just put location here, TBD. And yeah, we're going to put beached ship question mark. Maybe that's what we'll have. So for the siren, there's a couple things that I try to think of when I'm thinking about characters to role play. Is I try to give them a couple things. I try to give them two conflicting values. It's things that the party can use as levers, that that they can, if they discover them, could potentially manipulate them in some way, manipulate her in some way, or use them to manipulate her in some way. And that might come down to flaws as well, weaknesses, that kind of deal. But I typically try to come up with what is the thing that they want right now, what are they trying to achieve for the future, and then what are their core values, and then I will occasionally add in a flaw or a fear. But sometimes I think that those core values will suggest flaws and fears by themselves. Um, And so Ben Elder says, I'd say that she is practical, perhaps treats the party as beneath her. You don't argue with her. Yeah. And I don't disagree with you on all that, but those are all mannerisms and traits. We want to understand what drives all of that when we're doing this. Because the mannerisms and the trait are going to help you do the acting, but they're not going to give you any answers when your players throw a real curveball at you. And you're trying to figure out what the heck she would do in this situation that you never anticipated. So, like I said, what I like to do is go with her immediate want. So that's her objective, TBD, and then her overall goal, TBD. I'm going to say value 1, TBD, and value 2, TBD. And we'll put in secret here, TBD. Cool. So her objective is simple. She wants a voice. Siren wants to claim a new voice to replace the one stolen from her. Now, that's the immediate objective, right? That's what she wants the party to do. That's what she wants right now. Your savvy players, and especially any of my players, are going to try to drill into why. What is it that she wants that for? What is she going to use it for? And so we want to come up with her overall ambition. What is it that this serves? And we have another comment from Jonathan Frost, who says she's not happy with the circumstances and wants Evander defeated to return the playing world back to what it was. Yeah, that's a great objective. So we can, or that's a great ambition. So we can say something to the effect of, she wants Evander defeated so that this inland sea can return to what it once was. Which actually begs another question. Because in our loose lore of this world, we have talked about how it came to be that this inland sea was created and there was a civilization beneath it and all of that. And we talked about there being a conclave of wizards and what have you that had brought about the merging of the planes, and that flooded the basin of the civilization and created this inland sea. So we probably want to change this. So we want to say maybe that she wants Evander defeated so that she can return to the elemental plane of water. Cool, because she wouldn't have been in the initial city as it was, because it's was land at that point. Okay. Yeah, and I could see if she's an entity from the elemental plane of water. I could absolutely see to one of the comments earlier that she has the ability to maybe quell or change storms with her voice. Yeah, if she's an elemental being, I could see that certainly being the case. It also opens up some other kind of stat block options for us here as well, because she could be a genie of some kind, or djinn of some kind, potentially as a stat block too. We could think about that. Okay, so she wants her voice back. Eventually, she wants Evander defeated, and she wants to return back to the elemental plane of water, because she's trapped here like everybody else. Um, so the question then is, what values keep her from being altruistic with the party then? If she wants Evander defeated and she wants to go home, well, then, you know, why wouldn't she just simply help the party if they're willing to take those steps and try to make that happen for her? Why not cast her lot in with that? Um, Reticence, distrust, all those things could be potential motivations for her, either testing the party or trying to get or getting them to reclaim her voice as more of a payment or what. She might, um, yeah, we might say that maybe she's distrusting. We could see again that kind of predatory feature in her kind of coming out in the sense that, you know, back to your point about, party is beneath her. They're food from her point of view. And why should a tiger trust a lamb, sort of thing. Um, Ben Elder says she feels they're beneath her. They're potential allies, but food at the end of the day. Yeah, so I agree with you. I think something along those lines we start with here. And so, we can frame this value any way that we want. Um, and, you might boil it down to a single term that works for you. You might have a short sentence, a little description, whatever you want for this. I'm going to say, I'm going to do it like this. We're going to say, why, I don't want that bold. Why should a tiger trust the lamb? And that little phrase is kind of going to be, that's going to give me a trigger into kind of that mindset when I'm trying to play her. I'm going to think about that phrase, and that's going to help me get into her motivation here. But I also might want to expand on this a little bit just so that I remind myself, because it's going to be a little while till we play this, right? So watch the tiger, trust the lamb. Let's see here. The siren wants Evander defeated, but humanoids are food. How she is distrusting of any creature she can eat. Or distrustful of any creature that she can eat. Cool. Let's see here. Jonathan Frost says if she's a Marid or a Jinn, which is type of Jinn, she has an artifact that she is tied to. Discovery of that fact puts her at a severe disadvantage. Yeah, that's a potential here. That's definitely, that could be her secret. Let's see here. The siren is bound to artifacts that gives the controller some power over her. Now, bear in mind that when I say that for stat block that we talk about making her a Marid, I'm not saying that she is a Marid. I'm saying that maybe we use that stat block for her and we reskin it so that she is a different creature, but that she has those similar sorts of abilities. And I have to look at the stat block to see if that's kind of what we want to do. But that could mean that we don't have to lean so heavily into the being bound to an artifact. But I kind of like it, so let's work it in here. My point is that when we're just because you're using a stat block doesn't mean you have to use the lore that goes along with that stat block. You can change it as you see fit. All right. Value 2. So we want something that conflicts a little bit. with the, why should a tiger trust the lamb sort of thought process here. We want something that, for the most part, yeah, you can kind of go line in line here with your, but there's a possibility for the two things to kind of headbutt. The classic example of this sort of deal is like Darth Vader's character has, if you know familiar with the original Star Wars movies, he has got two motivations for the most part. He has a desire to see the Empire grow and succeed, and so the Empire is the most important thing to him. But he also has this other motivation, which is that the love for his children, and that's the most important thing to him. And there's no problem so as long as the two of those things don't come into conflict. But when they do, it forces an interesting choice. And so that can be something that we want to shoot for here in such a role play heavy character. Something that the two values that we can scrape against each other to force the siren in one direction or the other. So Ben Aller says she knows she's weak without her voice and has to compromise. Yeah, that is that's a lever. That's certainly something that the characters can use against her. Um, I'm thinking more something more fundamental, something that even once she has her voice back, because again, if this is a character who can quell storms with her singing voice, she's unlikely to disappear from the story. The characters are likely going to want to come back and make use of her again if they can. So let's set ourselves up in a place where she is where she is more than just kind of a one trick pony, where there's more to her than just getting her voice back. Um, let's give her something else that she needs or that she wants. Hmm. You know, shiny things come to mind for me. Um, and so we could have something to the effect of, watch the tiger, trust the lamb kind of deal, where it's like, your food, I look down on you, whatever. But, you know, but she could also have this sort of value of greed um, to her if we want something along those lines. And so, maybe she can be bought, maybe she can be persuaded with monetary treasure or what you say, items of monetary value. Um, let's see here. Mr. Mex says she wants to power up and go after the person that trapped her. Um, yeah. Jonathan Frost says this is shaping up to be very deep. LOL. Good work, everyone. Yeah. To your point, Mr. Max, about her wanting to power up, and go after the person that's her, like, that's kind of her ambition, right? So that's the core thing that she wants. Now we're thinking about things that kind of drive her socially. Um, what are the things that could, um, you know, what are the things that they either feed into that ambition or that um, they pull away? And I'm thinking maybe vanity. Let's what if we played into this vanity? Maybe that's part of what drives her to want to defeat Evander and go back to the elemental plane of water, because you could have this attitude of how dare he? How dare somebody else impose their will upon me? And so, vanity is another lever that we could kind of put in there. That is something that the characters could play with as they learn about her and they interact with her. Because, yeah, why should she trust them? She's so far above them. But if they play up to that vanity, then maybe it, maybe she's more pliable, more easily convinced of things that they do. Ben Elder says she wants a specific treasure from a captain that resists her song. Um, yeah, again, it's going back down to an objective, is what you're talking about here. It's something that she's physically going after. And we're thinking of something that's more of a personality trait. Um, and And so I'm saying kind of separate that. It's a nuanced point, and I understand that, but we're saying step away from what is it that she physically wants to happen in the world, right? Because we already have an idea for that. But what is it she physically wants to happen in the world? We're stepping away from that. We always say, who is she outside of the actions that she wants enact in this world? What about her makes her want those things? Um, why does she want to defeat Evander? Why does she care about going to the um, does she care about going to the elemental plane of water? Um, you know, why is that important to her? She's got plenty of prey here, and she can turn on and off the storms when she sees fit. Why does that matter to her? Well, again, that can come back to vanity. They can come back to something else. The wanting to reclaim her voice is pretty simple. She wants to survive because she wants to be able to sing and get food again here. Um, so I'm thinking let's lean into the vanity here. So let's say, uh, let's see here. A couple more things here. Ben notices. Uh, um, True is trying to lean into the vanity trait. Do sirens care about their daughters? Ooh. Ooh. That could be better than the vanity. That could be it. We could say, all. Oh, jeez, made this full screen accidentally. Let's say all true wealth is family. The siren values her daughters above all other things. Let's see here. Her lost daughters above all other things. So Ben, you say she wants she was separated from her daughters when she was trapped here. Um, yeah, that could be a good motivation for getting her back. Counterpoint to that, though, is if her daughters are here and just displaced or lost or what have you, um, and they can be reconnected, then that gives the players something that they can bite into later. That gives them a lever if they find one of these missing daughters. They have now information that they can use to impose upon the siren later on to get additional help from her at some point in the future, which again is playing the long game here. But we're setting ourselves up for a major character with this, something that is um, an oracle like creature that the players can come back to over and over and over again and get help from, so long as they can offer something of significance. And so the daughter thing is a useful lever for us. So I like that. I like that. Why should Tiger trust the lamb? Shouldn't. All true family, all true wealth is family. Great, except when the lamb shows up with your family. And now it's now your values are in conflict. Now something interesting is going to happen. So um, that is when I'm getting deep into role playing characters. This is kind of the approach that I use for this. It's what, 5 sentences ultimately here, and it boils things down to a person's core beliefs. It makes it so much easier to figure out what they do in a situation that you just didn't anticipate, which, let's be honest, is almost always going to happen when you're DMing. Your players are going to come up with all kinds of stuff that you didn't expect anybody to think of. And this helps you think, or at least helps me think a little bit clearer on my feet. So this gives us kind of the core of our siren here. And we can build out her looks and kind of get some thematic things in there, much like Ben was talking about earlier here about leading into her predatory aspects. Eyes that weigh the party, husky voice with teeth sharper than any human, beautiful but wrong, flash of scales, that kind of stuff, are all physical description things that we could put in here for her. Um, so we'll just jot down a few notes to start. And we're going to say, um, scroll up in the chat and steal your ideas, Ben. I'm going to put those down here. Okay, so piercing, evaluating. Actually, I'm going to say the piercing, evaluating eyes of a predator. We're going to say husky voice, sharp teeth, flash of fish scales, and beautiful but haunting and wrong. Cool. All right. And now, other than needing a stat block here, we have got a complete creature that's ready for some serious role play, which is a big part of this. So we want to be set for that. Now we can work on kind of filling out the rest of this sort of stuff. The quest block here is pretty simple. Effectively, I'm taking what is the siren's objective, and then what is the reward that the characters are going to get for that. So I'm just going to say the siren wants the characters to steal a new voice for her. In return, she will sing them the full ballad from which the sea shanty was derived. Cool. Nice and simple. I frequently, in situations like this, will like to, just kind of box out the quest, because it just makes it easy to find and to come back and reference. Because you get, 5 sessions away from this, and your players are going to go, "What was our quest again? What was it we were supposed to be doing? What exactly was it supposed to be?" And that gives you a quick reference. Okay, so we can get into the location for the sort of where they meet the siren if we want to do that. I would kind of build a lot of that into the arrival to kind of set the mood here as well. That's kind of my thought about, you show up and we set the atmosphere through description and that kind of deal, and then they encounter the siren. And so we have kind of the vibe going into this. And so to that end, I think I'm going to move location up here just to keep everything together. And then we're going to talk about finding this voice and stealing it. This is where we can get into some of that skill challenge stuff we were talking about before, right? Where we can make that a part of, or the core part of this section of the adventure, where you've got to do so much to find the voice, you've got to do so much to steal it. We should probably put some thought into how one steals a voice. Is there a magic item needed for that? Do they need to bring it back in a seashell or a special jar or something along those lines? What do they need to steal this voice? Is that provided by the siren? Do they have to acquire it on their own? What's the, what are the steps to this? So we should probably give that a little bit of thought at some point here as well. And then, what's going to go wrong Are what's going to be our complication? What's going to be the twist? What is going to make this a not straightforward and is going to throw a monkey wrench in the plans of the characters? Um, because you always want something like that. You want something that's going to go a little sideways on them. Because success is great, but it needs to be earned, especially in TTRPGs. Cool. All right. I think that with that, we are going to put a pin in it for the evening here. And we will pick up with this next time. One last comment here. Mr. Mex says voluntary or involuntary. Yeah. Yeah. When it comes to the voice, yeah. Can they get somebody? Can they get somebody to volunteer? Can they find a mime that's like, I'm not using this. Let's pass this off to let's pass this off to somebody else. Happy to take some compensation for it. Or do they have to steal it? That's definitely something worth considering here. Is how that goes about, how the characters go about solving that, and what possible options will they have. Um, all right, like I said, let's go ahead and put a pin in it here for this Friday. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this special session here. It's fun to do these. I know we don't do them every Friday, but it's a lot of fun to jump in every once in a while and do an extra session and get all of your input as we work through this. You guys had some amazing ideas tonight, some really cool stuff, and I really think that our Siren is going to become an important character in the campaign going forward, the kind of one that our characters come back to again and again and again. So really excited to build her out and to see how this adventure goes. Um, so if you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff helps the channel grow, helps more people find us and get into the chat here, and keeps it the dynamic, enjoyable, supportive place that it is. So thanks again, and I will see you all on our next session on Monday at our regular time. Talk to you then. Thanks, everybody.